What happened when you finally stood up to your toxic mom? The voicemail was waiting for me when I got home from what should have been the interview that changed everything. Hi, this is Jennifer from Creative Solutions. I'm calling to inform you that we've decided to move forward with other candidates. We appreciate your interest, but after the concerning information we received about your situation, we feel it's best to part ways. Good luck with everything. My hands were shaking as I played it back 3 times, each word hitting like a physical blow. The concerning information. There was only one person who knew about this interview, only one person who had the contact details, only one person vindictive enough to destroy my shot at financial independence. I called Jennifer back immediately. Oh, yes, she said, clearly uncomfortable. Your mother called this morning. She seemed very worried about you. She mentioned some ongoing mental health issues, said you'd been having episodes lately and that you weren't stable enough for a demanding position. She said she was calling out of concern for our company's well-being. The room started spinning. My mother called you. She was very convincing. Very concerned. She mentioned you'd been living with her because you couldn't manage on your own, and that taking on a full-time creative director role might trigger another breakdown. I'm sorry, but we can't take that risk. After I hung up, I sat in my car outside my apartment building, the apartment I'd been paying for myself for 3 years, despite what she told them, and something inside me finally snapped. Not broke. Snapped into place. This was Margaret Chen's masterpiece. My mother had spent 28 years perfecting the art of sabotage wrapped in maternal concern. When I was 16, she called my guidance counselor to say I was too emotionally fragile for AP classes. When I was 22, she told my college boyfriend's parents at his graduation that I had dependency issues and might not be the best influence on their son's promising career. When I was 25, she convinced my roommate that my freelance graphic design work was just a creative outlet I used to avoid facing my real problems. But this time, she crossed a line I didn't even know existed. The Creative Solutions position wasn't just a job, it was a $73,000 salary with benefits, enough to finally, completely cut the financial ties she used like puppet strings. It was my escape route, and she burned it down with a single phone call. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our family group chat, watching her latest performance. So proud of my baby for putting herself out there. These things happen for a reason. Maybe it's a sign to focus on healing first. Love you, sweetheart. 2 hearts. Aunt Linda had already responded, Margaret, you're such a supportive mom. Sarah is so lucky to have you. Cousin Mike chimed in, hang in there, Sarah. Your mom knows what's best. There it was, the Margaret Chen show in full swing. Concerned, loving, wise mother helping her troubled daughter navigate life's disappointments. The same woman who just torpedoed my career was collecting sympathy points and martyr credits in real time. I opened my voice recorder app and started driving to her house. For the first time in my life, I was going to let Margaret Chen show her true face. And this time, I was going to make sure everyone could see it. The revolution would be recorded. She answered the door in her favorite lavender cardigan, the one she wore to PTA meetings and church functions, the one that made her look like everyone's dream mother. Her face immediately shifted into what I'd learned to recognize as performance mode, slight concern creased between her eyebrows, head tilted at exactly the right angle to convey loving worry. Sarah, sweetheart. What a nice surprise. I was just about to call you about that interview. I know you must be disappointed, but you called them. I stepped inside without being invited, my phone already recording in my jacket pocket. You actually called my potential employer and sabotaged my interview. The mask flickered for just a second, a flash of something cold behind her eyes, before sliding back into place. Oh honey, I was trying to help. I could tell you were getting yourself worked up about this job, and I know how you get when you take on too much. I thought it would be better if they understood your challenges up front. My challenges. I kept my voice steady, knowing this was going straight to the family group chat if she gave me what I needed. Tell me more about these challenges, Mom. Well, you know. She gestured vaguely, settling into her rehearsed routine. The anxiety, the way you isolate yourself, how you've never been able to maintain stable relationships. Remember when you broke up with David? You were a mess for months. And your living situation isn't exactly. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights that I pay for myself. I've lived there for 3 years. Sarah, you know that's not sustainable. You're always calling me for money. I gave you $600 last month for your car payment. The words came out sharper than I intended. I've been supplementing your Social Security for 2 years. Her face went through a rapid series of micro-expressions, surprise, calculation, then something that looked almost impressed. Like she was proud of how well she trained me to keep her secrets. That's different, sweetheart. Family helps family. But you have to admit, you're not ready for a position like that. Senior Creative Director. The stress alone would. I've been freelancing successfully for 6 years. I make more annually than Dad did at the plant. Freelancing isn't a real career, Sarah. It's not stable. And frankly, after what happened with your breakdown in college. What breakdown? My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice level. You mean when I went to counseling for stress during finals week? When the counselor told me that most of my anxiety stemmed from your inability to handle normal life pressures, yes. Margaret settled back into her chair, warming to her favorite subject, my supposed inadequacies. Dr. Martinez was very concerned about your dependency issues. He said. Dr. Martinez told me I was being emotionally manipulated and suggested I consider limiting contact with my primary stressor. Which was you. The room went dead quiet. For the first time in my adult life, I contradicted one of her carefully constructed narratives with actual facts. Her face went through another series of changes, confusion, anger, then something calculating and dangerous. Sarah Elizabeth Chen. Her voice dropped to the tone she used to use before the worst punishments. I think you need to be very careful about how you're speaking to your mother right now. There it was. The threat. The reminder of power dynamics and consequences. The voice that had made me apologize for being hurt by her cruelty, that had convinced me I was lucky she loved me despite my obvious failures. But I was 28 years old, sitting in my own car, with my own apartment and my own bank account. And I was recording every word. Or what, Mom? Her smile turned arctic. Or you might find out what being on your own really means. The words hung in the air between us like a blade. Margaret's arctic smile widened as she watched me process her threat, clearly expecting the usual result, my immediate backpedal into apologies and submission. Instead, I felt something I'd never experienced before, genuine curiosity about how deep her manipulation went. What does that mean exactly? I asked, pulling out my phone openly now. Being on my own. Her eyes flicked to the device, but she was too committed to her power play to back down. It means no more family, Sarah. No more Sunday dinners, no more birthday cards from Aunt Linda, no more Christmas invitations. You think Uncle Robert is going to choose you over me? You think your cousins will pick sides against the woman who helped raise them when their own mother was going through her divorce? She stood up, pacing now, her cardigan fluttering behind her like battle armor. It means I tell everyone the truth about what you're really like. How you've been financially manipulating me, taking advantage of a widow on Social Security. How you've been lying to everyone about your living situation, your job stability, your mental health. Keep going, I said, holding the phone steady. Tell me more about this truth. Margaret's face flushed with a particular satisfaction she got from delivering psychological punishment. The truth is that you're a 30-year-old failure. 28. Who can't maintain a relationship, can't hold down a real job, and has been slowly bleeding your elderly mother dry while pretending to be independent. The truth is that you're exactly like your father, selfish, unstable, and completely incapable of putting family first. The mention of Dad should have destroyed me. It was her nuclear option, the comparison she'd weaponized since his death 4 years ago. But instead of the usual crushing shame, I felt something click into place. That's interesting, I said. Because last week at Cousin Amy's baby shower, you told everyone that I was your successful artist daughter, who was doing so well freelancing and had inherited her father's creative spirit and strong work ethic. Which story should I believe? For the first time, Margaret looked genuinely off balance. Her mouth opened and closed twice before she managed, that was. I was being supportive. A mother has to present a positive face even when she's lying to her daughter's potential employer about mental health episodes that never happened. Those episodes did happen. You were a mess after David, you could barely function. I was sad for 2 weeks after a 3-year relationship ended, then I started therapy and got on with my life. Dr. Rodriguez said I had one of the healthiest breakup recovery processes she'd seen. Margaret's face went completely white. Dr. Rodriguez? My therapist. The one I've been seeing for 8 months. The one I've never mentioned because I knew you'd find a way to interfere with that too. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see her brain working frantically, trying to recalibrate, to find the angle that would put her back in control. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted into what I privately called her wounded mother mode. Sarah, honey, I don't understand why you're attacking me like this. I've dedicated my entire life to taking care of you. After your father died, you were all I had left. Everything I do is because I love you and want to protect you from getting hurt. Her eyes filled with perfectly timed tears. If you can't see that, then maybe you really do need more help than I can give you. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, the guilt, the martyrdom, the subtle suggestion that my resistance to her control was evidence of mental illness. 6 months ago, it would have worked. I would have been apologizing within minutes, begging her forgiveness for my ingratitude. But 8 months of Dr. Rodriguez had given me a vocabulary for what I was witnessing. Gaslighting. Emotional blackmail. Narcissistic rage followed by victim playing. Mom, I said quietly, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to call Jennifer at Creative Solutions and explain that you don't speak for me, have never been my caretaker, and had no authority to share information about my mental health. I'm going to ask for a second chance at that interview. Margaret's tears evaporated instantly. Sarah, if you humiliate me like that. Then what? You'll tell the family more lies about me. You'll cut me off from people who apparently only tolerate me because you haven't turned them against me yet. I stood up, pocketing my phone with nearly 12 minutes of recorded conversation. I think I'm ready to find out who actually cares about me, and who's just been going along with your version of reality because it was easier. The look she gave me then was pure venom, no performance, no maternal concern, just naked rage at a possession that had dared to assert independence. You have no idea what you're starting, she said. Good, I replied. It's about time. I drove home in complete silence, my hands still trembling on the steering wheel. The recording felt like a loaded weapon in my pocket, 12 minutes of Margaret Chin dropping her mask so completely that even she couldn't spin it into loving concern. But by the time I pulled into my parking space, the doubt was already creeping in. This was Margaret we were talking about. The woman who convinced my 3rd-grade teacher that my stomach aches were attention-seeking behavior, not the lactose intolerance that a doctor confirmed 2 years later. She didn't stay down. My phone buzzed before I'd even made it to my front door. Family group chat. Mom, *K everyone, I'm a bit worried about Sarah tonight. She seemed really upset about not getting that job and said some concerning things when she stopped by. Just wanted to give you all a heads up in case she reaches out. Sometimes disappointment hits her harder than most. Love you all, red heart *. I stared at the screen, watching the responses roll in immediately. Aunt Linda, *oh no. Is she okay? Should someone check on her, *. Uncle Robert, what kind of concerning things? Cousin Amy, I can drive over if needed. Mom, *, I think she just needs some space right now. She accused me of some pretty hurtful things. I know she's just lashing out because she's hurt, but it's hard when your own daughter thinks you're the enemy. I'll keep trying to reach her tomorrow, *. Cousin Mike, *, hang in there, Aunt Margaret. You're a saint for putting up with, well, you know, *. I screenshotted the entire conversation, my hands shaking with rage. She'd beaten me home and was already controlling the narrative. The concerned mother, the unstable daughter, the family rallying around Margaret while painting me as the problem. Then my phone actually started ringing. Aunt Linda. Sarah, honey, your mom is really worried about you. She said you were talking about some pretty wild stuff tonight. What kind of wild stuff? I asked, putting her on speaker while I paced my living room. Something about her sabotaging your job interview? Sweetie, you know your mom would never do something like that. She's been bragging about your interview all week to everyone at her book club. Linda, she called my potential employer and told them I was mentally unstable. A long pause. Sarah, why would she do that? Because the job paid enough that I could stop giving her money every month. Giving her money? Linda's voice was genuinely confused. Honey, your mom told us you've been living with her since your breakup with David. She said you were struggling to make ends meet with your art hobby. My art hobby. I looked around my one-bedroom apartment, the one I'd furnished myself, the one where I built a legitimate freelance business that brought in $52,000 last year. The apartment that, according to Margaret, didn't exist. Linda, I haven't lived with my mother in 6 years. I have an apartment in Riverside Heights. I've been supporting myself and helping with her expenses since Dad died. But she shows us pictures of your room. Your old art projects on her refrigerator. She talks about making your favorite dinners. The pieces started clicking together. What pictures? Your bedroom, with all your graphic design stuff set up. She said you converted the guest room into an office space. I felt sick. She'd been staging my childhood bedroom. Keeping it exactly as it was when I'd moved out, taking photos to maintain the illusion that her adult daughter was still under her roof, still under her control. Linda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer. In the past 2 years, how many times have you actually seen me at Mom's house during family gatherings? Another long pause. Well, you always seem to just miss each other. You just left, or you were coming later, or you were sick. Because I was never there. She's been making excuses for why you never see me at her house because I don't live there. Sarah, this is a pretty serious accusation. Why would your mother lie about something like this? I closed my eyes, knowing how insane this was going to sound. Because she's been telling everyone I'm dependent on her while actually being dependent on me. She gets sympathy for supporting her struggling daughter and financial support from her successful daughter, and nobody questions the contradiction because you never see us together. Honey, I think you might be having some kind of episode. This sounds like paranoia. Maybe you should. I'm going to send you my lease agreement, I interrupted. And my bank statements showing the payments to her account. And then I'm going to send you a recording of her admitting to sabotaging my job interview. The line went dead quiet. You recorded your mother. 12 minutes of her explaining exactly how she was going to destroy my relationships with all of you if I didn't get back in line. When Linda spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller. Send me the recording. I spent 20 minutes agonizing over whether to hit send. The recording sat in my messages to Linda like a bomb waiting to detonate. Once I sent it, there was no taking it back. Margaret would know I'd gone nuclear, and her retaliation would be swift and brutal. But the family group chat was still pinging with messages of support for my worried mother and concern about my episode, and I realized I was already in the blast radius. She'd fired the first shot the moment she called Creative Solutions. I attached the audio file and typed, "This was recorded tonight at 6:47 p.m. Listen to the whole thing. Send." My phone immediately started buzzing with calls from Linda, but I turned it off and poured myself a glass of wine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Whatever happened next, I'd crossed the Rubicon. I tried to distract myself with Netflix, but every sound in the hallway made me jump. Margaret knew where I lived, had a spare key from the time I'd had surgery 2 years ago. The key I'd never asked for back because taking it would have meant admitting I didn't trust her. At 11:43 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Linda's husband Jim. Can you call me? It's important." Uncle Jim never texted. He barely used his phone for actual calls. I dialed him back with my heart hammering. "Sarah." His voice was rough, like he'd been arguing. "I need to ask you something straight. That recording Linda played for me. Is that really your mother talking?" "Yes." "Jesus Christ." A long pause. "How long has this been going on?" "Which part?" "All of it. The lying about where you live, the money situation, the..." He struggled for words. "The way she talks about you when you're not around." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What does she say when I'm not around?" "Sarah, I don't think you want to. Please. I need to know." Jim sighed heavily. "She tells us you're difficult. That you blame her for your dad's death, that you have angry outbursts, that she has to walk on eggshells around you. Last Christmas, she said you threatened to cut contact if she didn't give you money for rent." The room spun. "I've never asked her for rent money. Jim, I've given her over $7,000 in the past 2 years." "I know. Linda found the bank statements you sent. We've been going through our phones, looking at all the group chat messages differently." His voice got quieter. "Sarah, there's something else." Linda called Amy and Robert after she heard the recording. "We started comparing notes about things Margaret has told us about you over the years. And none of it adds up. The timeline of when you supposedly lived with her, the stories about your breakups, even basic stuff like your job. She told Robert you worked part-time at a coffee shop. She told Amy you were doing graphic design for free to build your portfolio. She told Linda you were making decent money but couldn't manage it properly. I felt like I was going to be sick." She gave everyone different versions. It looks like she tailored the story to whoever she was talking to, depending on what reaction she wanted. Sympathy, concern, validation for her parenting. Jim paused. "Linda wants to drive over tomorrow and see your apartment. She needs to see it with her own eyes. She doesn't believe me. She believes you. But she's been Margaret's best friend for 15 years. It's breaking her heart, Sarah. She needs to process what this means about someone she trusted completely." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the recording app on my phone. 12 minutes of audio that had started unraveling 28 years of carefully constructed lies. But Margaret had been playing this game longer than I'd been alive. She wouldn't go down without taking me with her. My phone buzzed with a new message in the family group chat. Mom, asterisk, I'm really concerned about Sarah's mental state tonight. She sent Linda some kind of manipulated audio recording that she claims is me saying terrible things. I think she may have had some kind of psychotic break. Has anyone else received strange messages from her, asterisk? The battle for reality was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My phone had been buzzing all night like an angry wasp trapped in a jar. The family group chat had exploded. Uncle Robert, asterisk Sarah, your mom showed me and Linda the original recording on her phone. It's completely different from what you sent us. What's going on here, asterisk? Cousin Amy, asterisk, this is really scary. Someone is lying and we need to figure out who, asterisk. Aunt Linda, asterisk, I'm coming over at 10 a.m. We need to talk, asterisk. But it was the private message from Cousin Mike that made my blood run cold. Asterisk, Aunt Margaret played us a recording of you threatening her last night. Your voice saying you'd destroy her reputation and make everyone choose sides. Sarah, what the hell is happening? She's talking about getting a restraining order. Asterisk. I replayed my recording from last night, my hands shaking. It was exactly as I remembered, Margaret's voice, clear as day, threatening to isolate me from the family if I didn't comply. But somehow she had a different version. One where I was the aggressor. At exactly 10 a.m., Linda knocked on my door. She looked like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face drawn and pale. Show me everything, she said without preamble. Your lease, your bank statements, your apartment. I need to see it all. I walked her through my one-bedroom place, watching her face as she took in the professional lighting setup for product photography, the dual monitors where I managed client accounts, the portfolio wall displaying work for companies she recognized. Real work. Substantial work. This is your space, she said finally, running her fingers along my desk. You built this yourself. 3 years ago. I pulled up my lease on my laptop. Linda, what did Margaret's recording sound like? Her face crumpled. It was your voice saying horrible things. Calling her pathetic, saying you were going to turn the whole family against her, threatening to ruin her life if she didn't stay quiet about your problems. Can you send it to me? She wouldn't let me keep a copy. Said it was too painful to have circulating. Linda sank onto my couch. But Sarah, it sounded exactly like you. Same speech patterns, same vocal inflections. If I hadn't heard your recording first. Something clicked in my brain. Linda, you know how Margaret always records our phone calls? She says it's because her memory isn't what it used to be. Yeah, she's done that for years. Even records herself at doctor's appointments. She has hundreds of hours of my voice on her phone. Every conversation we've had in the past 3 years. The realization hit me like ice water. There are apps that can splice audio clips together. Make it sound like someone said anything you want. Linda stared at me. You think she manufactured a fake recording of you threatening her? I think Margaret has been planning for this possibility for a long time. I think every recorded conversation was building an audio library she could use if I ever fought back. My phone rang. Dr. Rodriguez, returning the emergency call I'd made to her service at 6 a.m. Sarah, you sounded distressed in your message. What's happening? I put her on speaker so Linda could hear. Dar. Rodriguez, I confronted my mother about sabotaging my job interview. I recorded our conversation. Now she's claiming I threatened her and has a different recording that makes me sound unstable. And this surprises you? Dr. Rodriguez's voice was gentle but matter of fact. We've spent months discussing your mother's pattern of preemptive defense strategies. What did you think would happen when you finally challenged her directly? Linda's eyes widened. You've been discussing Margaret in therapy. For 8 months, I said. Dr. Rodriguez, can you tell Linda what we've identified about my mother's behavior patterns? I can't discuss specific sessions, but I can say that Sarah has been working through complex trauma related to long-term emotional manipulation and systematic reality distortion by a primary caregiver. What she's describing today sounds consistent with the defensive tactics we've been preparing for. After I hung up, Linda sat in silence for a full minute. Margaret has been asking detailed questions about everyone's relationships with you for months, she said finally. Who talks to you regularly, what you tell us about your life, whether we've noticed any concerning behaviors. I thought she was just being a worried mom, but she was mapping out her defense strategy. Linda's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and her face went white. She's called a family meeting for tonight. Says she has something important to share about your mental health crisis. The war for my reality was escalating, and Margaret was calling in reinforcements. The family meeting was set for 7 p.m. at Uncle Robert's house, neutral territory, Linda had suggested, though I was starting to realize nothing was neutral when Margaret was involved. She'd been working this family like a chessboard for years, and I was just now seeing the full scope of her game. I spent the afternoon preparing like I was going to trial. Screenshots of every bank transfer to Margaret's account. My lease agreement. Tax returns showing my actual income. The original audio recording backed up to 3 different cloud services. A written timeline of every lie she told about me, cross-referenced with family group chat messages. Dr. Rodriguez had squeezed me in for an emergency session at 4 p.m. Sarah, I need you to prepare for the possibility that your family won't believe you, she said gently. Narcissistic manipulation works because it's sophisticated. Your mother has spent decades building credibility while systematically undermining yours. But I have proof. Recordings, bank statements, witnesses to her lies. And she has 28 years of positioning herself as the concerned mother of a troubled daughter. She's had time to plant seeds of doubt about your reliability, your emotional stability, your relationship with reality itself. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. What will you do if they choose her version over yours? The question hit like a physical blow. I don't know. That's okay. But I need you to go in there knowing that your worth isn't determined by whether they believe you. Your reality doesn't become less real because other people can't see it. At 6:45 p.m., I sat in my car outside Uncle Robert's house, watching family members arrive. Margaret pulled up in the Honda Civic I'd helped her buy last year, the one she told everyone she paid for herself with her savings. She walked up to the house carrying a manila folder and wearing her navy blue dress, the one she saved for serious occasions like funerals and parent-teacher conferences. Aunt Linda met me at the door, squeezing my hand. "Whatever happens in there, I believe you," she whispered. Jim and I spent all afternoon going through old text messages. The inconsistencies in her stories go back years. The living room felt like a tribunal. Margaret sat in Robert's leather armchair, the position of authority, with her folder of evidence neatly arranged on the coffee table. Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia, cousins Amy and Mike, and Linda formed a semicircle around us like jury members. "Thank you all for coming," Margaret began, her voice carrying that particular tone of brave maternal suffering she'd perfected. "This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I'm genuinely worried about Sarah's mental state." She opened her folder with theatrical precision. "Yesterday, she came to my house in what I can only describe as a paranoid rage. She accused me of deliberately sabotaging her job interview, something I would never do to my own daughter. When I tried to reason with her, she became threatening." Margaret pulled out a printed transcript. "She recorded our conversation without my knowledge, then edited it to make it sound like I was the one being hostile. But I was recording too, and I have the real conversation." My stomach dropped. She'd been recording. Of course she had. Before we listened to it, Margaret continued, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, "I want everyone to know how much I love Sarah. But love means getting help for someone who's clearly having a break from reality." She pressed play on her phone. My voice filled the room, crystal clear and unmistakably mine. "You've been controlling me my whole life, and I'm done with it. I'm going to turn this entire family against you. I'll make up whatever stories I need to make you look bad. You want to play games? I'll destroy your reputation and leave you with nothing." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at the phone, my mouth open, listening to words I'd never spoken in a voice that was undeniably mine. "That's not. I never said that." My own voice sounded weak and unconvincing even to me. Margaret's expression was perfect, hurt, frightened, but still loving. "Sarah, sweetheart, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't remember saying these things, do you?" Cousin Amy was looking at me with something between pity and fear. Uncle Robert wouldn't meet my eyes. Even Linda seemed shaken. "Play my recording," I said desperately, pulling out my phone. "Play what really happened." But as my audio filled the room, Margaret's voice threatening to isolate me, her cold calculation about destroying my relationships, I watched their faces and realized Dr. Rodriguez had been right. They were hearing two different realities, and Margaret's was more comfortable to believe. The room felt suspended in time as both recordings finished playing. I watched the faces around me, some confused, others calculating, all of them trying to reconcile two completely different versions of reality. Uncle Robert cleared his throat first. "So we have two recordings of the same conversation, and they're completely different." "Not completely different," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Listen to the timestamps. Her recording is 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Mine is 11 minutes and 53 seconds. She's only playing you selected pieces." Margaret's face flickered, just for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Sarah, honey, I only recorded the parts where you became threatening. I was too upset to keep recording the whole thing." "Then where's the rest of it?" Linda asked quietly. "If you were recording for safety, wouldn't you want the full context?" "I deleted the worst parts," Margaret said, her voice breaking slightly. "A mother shouldn't have to keep audio of her daughter calling her pathetic, worthless. The language she used was so vile I couldn't bear to." "Play the timestamp right before my supposed threat," I interrupted. "Let them hear what I was supposedly responding to." Margaret's hand moved protectively over her phone. "I don't think subjecting everyone to more of this is healthy." "Mom." Cousin Mike leaned forward. "If Sarah is having some kind of breakdown, we need all the information. Play the full recording." For the first time all evening, Margaret looked genuinely cornered. "Michael, some things are too painful for a mother to share. The way she talked about her father, the accusations she made about my parenting." She shuddered delicately. "I won't traumatize this family with that level of cruelty." "What accusations?" Aunt Patricia asked sharply. Patricia had always been the skeptical one, the accountant who noticed when numbers didn't add up. "Margaret, what specifically did Sarah say about your parenting?" The question hung in the air. I realized Patricia was setting a trap. If Margaret detailed my supposed accusations, she'd have to explain what prompted them. If she refused to elaborate, it would look suspicious. She blamed me for her struggles. Said I had deliberately held her back, sabotaged her relationships. Margaret's voice was getting higher, more defensive. "Completely delusional accusations about me interfering with her career." "But that's exactly what you told Jennifer at Creative Solutions," I said quietly. "You called my potential employer and told them I was mentally unstable. I have Jennifer's number if anyone wants to verify." The room went dead silent. This was new information. I hadn't mentioned the specific employer's name in either recording. Uncle Robert pulled out his phone. "What's the company name?" "Creative Solutions. Jennifer Morrison, HR Director. I can give you her direct line." Margaret's face had gone pale. "Robert, you can't just call some random company Ann." "Why not?" he asked, already dialing. "If Sarah is making this up, they'll have no record of any call from you." "Robert, please," Margaret's voice was getting shrill. "This is humiliating for our family. Do you really want to air our private business to strangers?" But Robert had already connected. "Hello, this is Robert Chen. I'm calling about my niece Sarah Chen's interview process. We're trying to verify some information about what happened." "Yes, I'll hold." The silence in the room was suffocating. Margaret sat rigidly in her chair, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. I could practically hear her brain working, calculating her next move. "Yes, I'm still here," Robert said into the phone. "Someone called you claiming to be Sarah's mother." "I see. And what exactly did this person tell you?" "Aha. Mental health concerns, instability." His eyes met mine across the room, and I saw the exact moment he understood what Margaret had done. And you're certain this call came from someone claiming to be her mother, not Sarah herself? Thank you for clarifying. He hung up and stared at Margaret with an expression I'd never seen before. Jennifer Morrison remembers the call very clearly. A woman claiming to be Sarah's mother, expressing concern about hiring someone with documented episodes of workplace instability and a history of breakdowns under pressure. The folder in Margaret's lap seemed to be shaking. Robert, I can explain. Explain what, exactly? How you cost your daughter a $73,000 job by lying to her potential employer. For the first time in my life, I watched Margaret chin at a complete loss for words. The silence stretched until Margaret's survival instincts finally kicked in. She straightened in her chair, and I watched her shift into a mode I'd never seen before, not concerned mother or wounded victim, but something colder and more calculating. You want the truth? Her voice was steady now, almost conversational. Fine. Yes, I called Jennifer Morrison. But not to sabotage Sarah, to protect her from herself. She looked around the room with the confidence of someone who just found her footing. Sarah has been spiraling for months. She's been obsessed with this job, calling it her escape route. Escape from what, exactly? From a mother who loves her. She's been seeing some therapist who's filled her head with ideas about cutting family ties, about how everyone who cares about her is somehow toxic. I felt the room's energy shift slightly. She was spinning this, finding the angle that made her interference look like protection. 3 weeks ago, she called me crying at 2 a.m. about anxiety attacks. 2 weeks ago, she had a panic attack at the grocery store and called me to come get her. Last week, she told me she was ready to burn everything down if this interview didn't work out. Margaret's voice carried just the right note of maternal concern mixed with fear. What was I supposed to do? Let her take a high-pressure executive position when she's clearly in crisis? My heart started racing because every single detail was wrong, but they were close enough to things that had actually happened that they sounded plausible. I had called her 3 weeks ago, but about a client who'd refused to pay, not anxiety attacks. I had asked her to pick me up last week, because my car was in the shop, not because of a panic attack. That's not what happened, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. You're twisting. Am I? Margaret pulled out her phone. Should I play the voicemail you left me last Tuesday? The one where you said you felt like you were drowning and couldn't handle much more. I remembered that call. I'd been overwhelmed with 3 project deadlines hitting the same week and had vented to her about feeling swamped with work. But taken out of context. Margaret, Linda said slowly, why didn't you mention any of this before? You've been telling us Sarah was doing well. Because I was trying to protect her privacy. A mother doesn't air her daughter's struggles to the whole family unless she absolutely has to. She dabbed at her eyes again. I've been carrying this burden alone for months, trying to get her help quietly. But when she started making these paranoid accusations, recording me without permission, threatening to expose me, I realized she's sicker than I thought. Cousin Amy leaned forward. Sarah, is it true you're seeing a therapist about cutting family ties? The question was a trap. If I said yes, it confirmed Margaret's narrative about outside influence and family destruction. If I said no, I'd be lying, and they might already know I was in therapy. I'm in therapy for anxiety and family dynamics, I said carefully. Dr. Rodriguez has never suggested cutting anyone off. She's helped me understand patterns of communication that. Patterns of communication, Margaret repeated with a bitter laugh. Is that what we're calling it? Sarah, this therapist has convinced you that your family is your enemy. She's made you paranoid and suspicious of people who love you. You sabotaged my job interview. The words came out louder than I intended, and I saw everyone in the room react to what must have sounded like an unhinged outburst. Margaret's expression shifted to something that looked like genuine fear. And there it is. The anger, the accusations. This is what I've been dealing with. Uncle Robert was watching this exchange with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle. Margaret, let's say Sarah has been struggling. Why not encourage the job? Structure and success are usually good for mental health. Because she wasn't ready. The stress would have made everything worse. Margaret's voice took on a tone of infinite patience. Robert, you don't understand what it's like watching your child self-destruct. Sometimes love means making hard choices they hate you for. I felt the narrative slipping away from me like water through my fingers. Every true thing I said sounded like the protests of someone in denial. Every lie she told sounded like the painful honesty of a worried mother. Show them your staged bedroom, I said desperately. Show them the photos you've been using to prove I live with you. Margaret looked genuinely puzzled. What photos? Sarah, what are you talking about? And in that moment, I realized she'd already gotten rid of the evidence. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and scrolled to Linda's contact. Linda, yesterday you told me about the pictures Mom shows everyone of my bedroom. The guest room converted into an office. Tell them. Linda looked uncomfortable, glancing between Margaret and me. Well, Margaret does show us photos sometimes. What photos? Margaret's confusion looked absolutely genuine. Linda, I think you might be misremembering. I don't show people photos of Sarah's old room. You showed me last month, Linda said slowly, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. When I asked how Sarah was doing with her art projects. You had pictures on your phone of her workspace. Oh. Margaret's face lit up with understanding. You mean the photos Sarah sent me of her apartment setup? I was so proud of how professional her home office looked that I shared them with you. But those were taken at her place in Riverside Heights. I felt the ground shift beneath me. She was right, I had sent her photos of my workspace when I upgraded my equipment last year. Photos she could easily describe as being from her house if no one had been to my apartment to verify. That's not, you said it was the guest room, Linda said weakly, but she was looking at me with growing doubt. I think there might be some confusion about what I said, Margaret replied gently. Sarah, honey, this is exactly what I'm worried about. You're misremembering conversations, creating connections that aren't there. Cousin Mike shifted in his seat. Aunt Margaret, what about the money situation? Sarah showed Linda bank statements proving she's been supporting you. Finally, something concrete they couldn't twist. I pulled up my banking app, hands trembling as I navigated to the transfer history. $600 on March 15th for your car payment. $400 on February 23rd for groceries. $350 on January 30th for your electric bill. Margaret nodded sadly. And I'm grateful for Sarah's help during my tight months. But she's not supporting me, she's occasionally helping out when my social security doesn't stretch far enough. The way she describes it makes it sound like I'm completely dependent on her, which simply isn't true. Occasionally. My voice cracked. Mom, I've sent you money 12 times in the past 6 months. 12 times. Uncle Robert pulled out his phone calculator. Sarah, that's over $4,000. Margaret's face showed surprise, then concern. Sarah, are you saying you've been keeping track of every dollar? Calculating exactly how much you've given your mother like some kind of loan? The way she said it made me sound petty, transactional. Like a daughter who was resentfully counting the cost of helping her widowed mother instead of giving freely out of love. That's not how I meant. Because that's not healthy, sweetheart. Family helps family without keeping score. Margaret's voice was infinitely patient. The fact that you've been tracking every transaction, adding them up, that suggests a level of resentment that really worries me. Aunt Patricia, who'd been quiet through most of this, finally spoke up. Margaret, regardless of how Sarah feels about it, $4,000 in 6 months is substantial help. Why have you been telling us she's financially struggling if she's actually in a position to support you? For a split second, Margaret's mask slipped. Just a flash of irritation at being cornered by numbers that didn't lie. Then she recovered with a sigh that sounded bone-deep exhausted. Because I was embarrassed, she admitted. What kind of mother takes money from her child? I've been ashamed of needing help, so I let you all think she was the one struggling. I thought it was protecting both our dignity. It was perfect. A lie that sounded like painful honesty, wrapped in shame and maternal sacrifice. Even I almost believed it. Almost. The room felt like it was tilting. Margaret had just admitted to lying about our financial situation, but somehow made it sound noble. I watched the faces around me, some sympathetic to her embarrassment, others still processing the contradictions. That's a very convenient explanation, Aunt Patricia said dryly. But it doesn't address the job sabotage. Margaret, you cost Sarah a $73,000 salary. How does that protect anyone's dignity? Margaret's composure flickered again. Patricia, I've explained this. Sarah wasn't ready for that level of responsibility. The stress. According to who? Patricia interrupted. You. Sarah's been freelancing successfully for years. She supports herself and helps you financially. What exactly makes you qualified to determine her career readiness? I'm her mother. That's not a professional qualification. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Patricia had always been the family's bullshit detector, and she was clearly running calculations that weren't adding up in Margaret's favor. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I glanced down and my heart stopped. Asterisk, this is Jennifer Morrison from Creative Solutions. Your uncle gave me your number. I've been thinking about that call from your mother, and something bothers me about it. Could we talk? Asterisk. I showed the text to Linda, who was sitting closest to me. Her eyes widened as she read it. What is it? Uncle Robert asked, noticing our exchange. Jennifer Morrison wants to talk to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She says something bothers her about the call. Margaret went very still. Sarah, I don't think dragging more strangers into our family crisis is. I'm calling her back, I announced, standing up. Right now. On speaker. Sarah, no, Margaret's voice was sharp with panic. This is inappropriate. We shouldn't involve. But I was already dialing. Jennifer picked up on the second ring. Sarah. Thank you for responding so quickly. I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but something has been nagging at me since your uncle called. I'm here with my family, I said, putting the phone on speaker. Can you tell us about the call you received? Well, that's just it. The woman who called claimed to be your mother, but she knew very specific details about our company structure and the creative director position that weren't in the job posting. Details that would only be available to someone who'd researched our internal hierarchy quite thoroughly. The room went dead silent. Margaret's face had gone completely white. Jennifer continued, she mentioned our demanding client retention expectations and referenced our recent merger with the Portland branch. That information isn't public knowledge. How would your mother know those details unless she'd done extensive research into our company? I felt like I couldn't breathe. Are you saying? I'm saying whoever called me spent considerable time researching our company before making that call. This wasn't a worried mother making an impulsive decision. This was planned, calculated, and informed. Jennifer's voice was crisp, professional. I've been in HR for 15 years, and I've never had a family member demonstrate that level of advanced preparation for sabotage. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Sabotage. Uncle Robert was staring at Margaret with dawning horror. Margaret, how did you know those details about Sarah's potential employer? Margaret opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For the first time all evening, she had no ready answer. I must have. Sarah mentioned. I never told you the company name, I said quietly. I specifically didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd interfere. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Margaret's shoulders sagged in defeat. I googled the number from your phone, she whispered. When you were in the bathroom last week. I looked up the company because I wanted to understand what kind of position you were applying for. The admission hit the room like a bomb. The confession hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Margaret had just admitted to going through my phone, researching my potential employer, and making a calculated decision to destroy my career prospects. You went through my phone, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You violated my privacy to gather ammunition against me. Margaret's face crumpled, but this time the tears looked different. Less performed, more desperate. I was worried about you. I needed to understand what you were getting yourself into. By researching their internal company structure. Aunt Patricia's voice was ice cold. Margaret, that level of investigation takes hours. This wasn't maternal concern, this was reconnaissance. Uncle Robert was scrolling through his phone, his face grim. Jennifer, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. Can you tell us exactly what this woman told you about Sarah's mental health? She claimed Sarah had a documented history of workplace breakdowns, that she'd been hospitalized for stress-related episodes, and that hiring her would be a liability issue for our company. She also said Sarah was currently living at home due to inability to manage independent living. Each lie hit me like a physical blow. Not just sabotage, but character assassination so thorough it would have been impossible to recover from professionally. She said I'd been hospitalized. My voice cracked. Mom, I've never been hospitalized for anything except when I had my appendix out in college. Margaret was crying openly now, but even her tears couldn't mask the calculation in her eyes. I could practically see her looking for the angle that would minimize the damage. I may have exaggerated some details. But Sarah, you have to understand, I genuinely believe this job would be too much pressure for you. Everything I said came from a place of love. Love? Linda's voice was shaking. Margaret, you told a potential employer that Sarah had been hospitalized for mental health issues. You could have destroyed her entire career permanently. That information could follow her for years. Cousin Mike was staring at his phone screen, his face pale. Aunt Margaret, I just googled creative solutions. The research you would have had to do to know about their merger and client retention policies, that's not casual browsing. That's investigative level work. The walls were closing in on Margaret from every direction. I watched her cycle through different expressions, fear, calculation, desperation, before landing on something that looked almost like relief. You want to know the truth, she said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. The complete truth. Something in her tone made my skin crawl. This wasn't surrender, this was Margaret preparing for her final gambit. Yes, Uncle Robert said carefully. We want the truth. Margaret looked directly at me, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not love, not concern, not even anger. Something colder and more honest than any emotion she'd ever shown me. The truth is that Sarah getting that job would have ruined everything. Not for her, for me. Her voice was steady now, matter of fact. She gives me $600 a month. She drives me to doctor's appointments, handles my insurance calls, fixes my computer problems. She's available whenever I need her because her freelance schedule is flexible. The room had gone dead silent. Margaret was still looking at me, and I realized she was finally, after 28 years, telling me exactly who she was. A $73,000 salary with benefits would have made her completely independent. She would have stopped needing me, stopped prioritizing me, stopped being. She paused, searching for the right word. Available. Available, I repeated numbly. Margaret nodded. I called Jennifer Morrison because I couldn't afford to lose my daughter to success. The truth, when it finally came, was somehow worse than all the lies combined. The confession hit the room like a physical force. Even Margaret seemed shocked by her own honesty, her hand flying to her mouth as if she could take back the words. You sabotaged your own daughter's career to keep her available. Aunt Linda's voice was barely a whisper. Margaret's composure was cracking in real time. I didn't. I mean, that's not how I. She looked around the room desperately, searching for a sympathetic face and finding none. You don't understand what it's like being alone. After Harold died, Sarah was all I had left. Sarah doesn't belong to you, Uncle Robert said, his voice heavy with disgust. She's not your emotional support animal. But she is my daughter. Margaret's voice cracked with genuine panic now. I raised her, I sacrificed everything for her. Is it so wrong to want her to stay close? To need her? The raw desperation in her voice was somehow more chilling than her earlier calculated manipulation. This was Margaret without her mask, not evil, just utterly, completely selfish in a way that couldn't comprehend other people as separate beings with their own lives. Mom, I said softly, and something in my tone made everyone turn to look at me. Do you love me, or do you love having me? The question hung in the air. Margaret opened her mouth several times, but no sound came out. Her face cycled through confusion, hurt, and something that might have been recognition. That's not fair, she finally whispered. You can't ask me to choose between loving you and needing you. They're the same thing. No, they're not. My voice was steadier than I felt. Love wants the other person to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you. Need wants the other person to stay, even if staying makes them miserable. Margaret was crying again, but these tears were different, uglier, more desperate. Sarah, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I'll call Jennifer Morrison back, I'll explain that I was wrong about everything. It's too late for that, Jennifer's voice came through my phone speaker. We'd all forgotten she was still on the call. Even if I personally believed the retraction, our legal department would never approve hiring someone whose family members have made unsubstantiated mental health claims. The liability exposure is too high. The finality in her voice seemed to break something in Margaret. She doubled over like she'd been physically struck. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I didn't realize it would be permanent. You didn't care if it was permanent, I said quietly. You just wanted me to stay trapped. Cousin Amy was crying too now, her hand pressed to her mouth. Aunt Margaret, how could you do that to your own child? Margaret looked up with mascara streaking down her cheeks, and for a moment she looked genuinely confused by the question. Because I love her more than anyone else ever will. Because a mother's love is supposed to come first. Love doesn't destroy, Aunt Patricia said coldly. What you're describing is possession. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from Dr. Rodriguez, * emergency session available at 9 p.m. if you need it. Proud of you for standing your ground, *. I showed the text to Margaret, watching her face as she read it. You told your therapist you were going to do this, she said, her voice flat with realization. You planned this whole confrontation. I planned to tell the truth. I didn't know you'd confess to sabotage. Margaret laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. Truth. You want to talk about truth? The truth is that after tonight, you'll never need me again. And I'll have nothing left. She gathered her purse and folder with shaking hands. I hope your independence is worth more than your mother's love. It is, I said simply. Because what you're offering isn't love. Margaret walked out without another word, leaving the rest of us sitting in stunned silence. The silence after Margaret left felt different from any quiet I'd ever experienced. It wasn't peaceful, it was the hollow aftermath of a controlled demolition, dust still settling around the wreckage of 28 years of carefully constructed lies. Uncle Robert was the first to speak. Jesus Christ, Sarah. How long has she been doing this to you? Forever, I said, the word coming out more broken than I intended. But I thought it was normal. I thought all mothers were like that. Linda was scrolling through her phone with a grim expression. I'm going back through every conversation I've had with Margaret about you for the past 5 years. God, Sarah, the stories she told us. She looked up, her eyes red. She said you called her crying every week. That you couldn't make decisions without her input. That you'd had a dependency relapse after David and moved back home temporarily. I've never lived with her as an adult. Not even for a night. The words felt surreal to say out loud. She's been creating an entire fictional version of my life. Cousin Mike was pale, staring at his hands. Last Christmas, she pulled me aside and asked me to keep an eye on you because you've been making concerning comments about not wanting to be alive. The room went cold. What? She said you'd been talking about feeling hopeless, that she was worried about your safety but didn't want to embarrass you by making it public. Mike looked sick. Sarah, I've been watching you at family gatherings for months, looking for signs of depression, wondering if I should stage an intervention. My hands started shaking. I've never said anything like that. Ever. Mike, I've been doing better than I have in years. I know that now. But she was so convincing, so worried. She asked me to report back to her if you said anything concerning. He ran his hands through his hair. Fuck, I've been spying on my own cousin because my aunt convinced me you were suicidal. Amy was crying openly now. She told me you'd been having paranoid episodes. That you thought people were conspiring against you, that you'd accused her of plotting to keep you from success. She said it was textbook persecution complex. The systematic nature of it was breathtaking. Margaret hadn't just been sabotaging my present, she'd been laying groundwork to discredit any future resistance I might mount. If I ever accused her of manipulation, my family already believed I was paranoid. If I ever fought back, they'd been primed to see it as mental illness. Patricia, I said, turning to my aunt who'd been quietly taking notes on her phone. You've been the most skeptical tonight. What convinced you I was telling the truth? She looked up from her screen. The money trail. Numbers don't lie, and I've been running calculations all evening. She turned her phone toward the group. Based on what Margaret's told us over the years about Sarah's financial struggles, and what we now know about the actual cash flow between them, Margaret has been running a sophisticated emotional Ponzi scheme. A what? Linda asked. She's been collecting sympathy from us for supporting her struggling daughter while actually being supported by that daughter. She gets to look like a martyr and maintain her lifestyle. It's financial fraud wrapped in maternal concern. Uncle Robert was shaking his head slowly. The job sabotage makes perfect sense now. Sarah getting a real salary would have exposed the whole con. My phone rang. Dr. Rodriguez, calling right on time for our emergency session. I need to take this, I said, standing up. But there's something else you all need to know. I paused at the doorway, looking back at these people who'd finally seen Margaret for what she was. She's not going to disappear quietly. Margaret doesn't accept defeat, she reframes it as martyrdom. By tomorrow morning, she'll have a new story about how her ungrateful daughter turned the whole family against her. She'll be the victim again, and I'll be the villain who destroyed a loving mother's life. Linda's face went pale. What do you think she'll do? I thought about Margaret's expression as she'd gathered her things, not defeated, but calculating. Already working on her next move. She's going to try to take back control of the narrative, I said. And she's going to make sure everyone knows exactly how much I've hurt her. As I walked to my car to talk to Dr. Rodriguez in private, I could already feel the storm Margaret was preparing to unleash. The war for my reality was just beginning. I was right about Margaret's retaliation, but I underestimated the scale of it. The next morning, I woke up to a Facebook post that had been shared 47 times, a photo of Margaret looking frail and heartbroken, with a caption that started, "When your own child turns against you." She'd crafted a masterpiece of martyrdom, describing how her mentally ill daughter had manipulated the entire family with doctored recordings and fabricated evidence to hide her own instability. But something unexpected had happened while I slept. My phone was buzzing with notifications, but they weren't what I expected. Screenshots from cousins I barely knew, forwarded messages, voicemails from family friends. Margaret's post was being dissected in real time by people who'd watched her operate for decades. The first comment was from my dad's sister Janet, who lived in Seattle. Funny how Sarah's mental illness only became an issue after Harold died and the inheritance question started. Some of us remember the real Margaret. Then Dad's brother Paul, "This is rich coming from someone who tried to contest Harold's will because she thought Sarah got too much of his life insurance. The same Sarah you're now claiming can't manage her own life." I'd forgotten about the inheritance drama. After Dad died, his life insurance had been split between Margaret and me equally, $50,000 each. Margaret had hired a lawyer to challenge it, claiming I was too unstable to manage that kind of money responsibly. The lawyer had dropped her case after one meeting. But it was Cousin Rachel's comment that made me start crying. "Aunt Margaret, I've been reading these responses all morning. I think it's time someone said this publicly. We've all been comparing notes, and your stories about Sarah have never added up. Ever. This isn't a family rally behind you, it's an intervention." The comments kept coming. Family members sharing their own stories of Margaret's manipulation, her contradictory narratives, her decades of pitting relatives against each other. People I hadn't spoken to in years were posting about times Margaret had lied to them about me, or used me as a cover story for her own behavior. Most shocking was Uncle Robert's comment, "Margaret, after last night's meeting, Linda and I spent 3 hours going through old messages. We found 17 different versions of Sarah's living situation, 12 different stories about her mental health, and documented evidence of you asking multiple family members to monitor Sarah for concerning behavior that never existed. This isn't about Sarah's mental health. This is about your need for control. By noon, Margaret had deleted the post. At 1:30 p.m., she called me from a number I didn't recognize. Sarah. Her voice was different, smaller, stripped of all performance. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Do you think I'm a bad person? The question caught me off guard. For the first time in my life, Margaret sounded genuinely uncertain, like she was actually wondering about the answer. I think you're a person who was so afraid of being alone that you convinced yourself love and control were the same thing, I said finally. I don't think you wanted to hurt me. But I think you were willing to hurt me to avoid losing me. A long silence. The family isn't going to forgive this, are they? I don't know. But Mom, that's not actually the right question. What's the right question? The right question is whether you can forgive yourself enough to get help. Another silence, longer this time. I don't know how to love someone without needing them, she whispered. That's what therapy is for, I said. Dr. Rodriguez has a colleague who specializes in Sarah. Her voice was firmer now. I need you to know that everything I did because I was terrified of losing you. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it love. Broken love, but love. I know, Mom. And I need you to know that standing up to you doesn't mean I don't love you back. It means I finally love myself too. She hung up without saying goodbye. 3 months later, Margaret started seeing Dr. Chen, no relation, for what she described to the family as adjustment therapy for recent life changes. She hasn't apologized, but she also hasn't interfered. It's not forgiveness, but it's space. I never got the creative solutions job, but Jennifer Morrison referred me to a colleague at another firm. I'm now senior art director at Morrison & Associates, making $68,000 with full benefits. Margaret doesn't know my salary, my schedule, or my employer's name. The family dynamics shifted permanently. Some relatives who believed Margaret's version for years made genuine efforts to rebuild relationships with me. Others found the cognitive dissonance too uncomfortable and gradually faded away. It turns out knowing who really cares about you versus who just goes along with the loudest narrative is its own kind of gift. Uncle Robert still hosts family dinners, but Margaret and I haven't attended the same one yet. We're both invited. We both choose carefully. Last week, I got a text from her, saw your design work credited in Portland Monthly magazine. Very professional. Your father would be proud. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And for the first time in my life, it felt like she was seeing me instead of managing me. Standing up to my toxic mother didn't give me the dramatic vindication I'd fantasized about. It gave me something better, the quiet, ordinary freedom to live my own life without requiring her permission or fearing her sabotage. Some days, that's everything.